The Woman Within, Jung's Forgotten Warning. Before we begin, a moment of honesty. If you're watching this, it means that somewhere inside, you already feel it. That something in this modern world of love, relationships, and gender doesn't make sense. That what you were taught about women, about their nature, their desires, their hearts, doesn't match what you've seen with your own eyes. You might even feel ashamed for thinking this way, because the voices around you insist, no, it's all equal now. It's all fair. Men and women are the same. But deep down, there is something darker beneath the surface. Something you can't name, but you can feel it. That's why this video exists. And if, as you listen, some part of you awakens, if you hear in these words the truth you've long suspected, subscribe to this channel. Leave a comment. Your voice matters. Your awakening matters. And there are other men out there who need to hear that they are not alone. Now, let us begin. Carl Gustav Jung, the man we remember as the father of analytical psychology, the man who gave us the concepts of archetypes, the collective unconscious, shadow work. But what few people know, what few people dare to talk about, is that Jung also wrote extensively and privately about the nature of women, not just in his published works, but in his private notes, in letters to friends, in conversations never meant for the public eye. And what he said was brutal. Not because he hated women, he didn't, but because he saw something that most men, even today, refuse to face, that there is a side of the feminine that is not light, but shadow, a side that seduces, manipulates, consumes, a side that can and will destroy a man who is not awake. At the heart of Jung's insight was one word: anima, the inner feminine that lives inside every man, an archetype born from millennia of human experience, shaped by our ancestors, by our mothers, by culture, by myth. Every man carries within him an image of woman, an ideal, a dream, a force that pulls him toward the feminine, but also blinds him to its reality. Jung wrote, "When the anima is not made conscious, she merges with the external woman, and he will mistake projection for truth." In other words, most men, perhaps even you, do not fall in love with a real woman. They fall in love with the image of woman they already carry inside, an image shaped by childhood, by media, by unmet needs. And when they meet a woman who seems to fit this image, the projection takes over. She is no longer just a person. She becomes the goddess, the savior, the muse, the answer. But this is an illusion, and all illusions break. Consider this. Have you ever been with a woman who seemed perfect at first? Who seemed to get you in a way no one else did? Who awakened in you feelings of awe, longing, even worship? You told yourself, she is different. She is special. She is the one. And so you gave time, attention, energy, emotion. You ignored her flaws. You excused her distance. You overlooked her cruelty, because to admit the truth, that she was not the woman you imagined, would have meant shattering the dream. But eventually, reality intruded. A look, a word, a betrayal, and suddenly, the mask fell. What followed? Rage, grief, confusion, not because of what she did, but because of what you had projected onto her. You weren't mourning the real woman. You were mourning the collapse of your own illusion. Jung saw this dynamic again and again in his male patients. Men broken not by women, but by their fantasies of women. Men trapped in cycles of worship and rejection. Men who could not distinguish between the animo inside and the real human being before them. He wrote, "The projection of the anima upon the woman is responsible for many of the tragic entanglements of the male psyche." And here is where it becomes brutal, because Jung also saw in the deepest layers of the psyche that not all women resist this projection. Some embrace it, some feed on it, consciously or unconsciously. They sense the power it gives them, and they use it. There is a term Jung used privately, far less famous than anima, the devouring feminine. A force within certain women, or more accurately within certain archetypes of the feminine, that seeks not union, but domination, not love, but possession. Not partnership, but consumption. You've seen her. The woman who lures you in with softness, then controls you with silence. Who flatters you when she needs something, then withdraws when you give too much. Who offers just enough warmth to keep you addicted, but never enough to fulfill you. She appears in every man's life, in one form or another, in the workplace, in relationships, in casual encounters, and when you fall for her, when you give your soul to her, she does not weep. She watches, she takes, and when there is nothing left to take, she moves on. Not out of evil, but out of instinct, because in the shadow of the feminine lies this truth. She does not want you weak, but she also does not want you stronger than her. Jung wrote in a letter to a close friend, the anima can be muse or witch, often both in the same woman. Woe to the man who cannot tell the difference. And that, my friend, is where most men fall. Let me tell you about Thomas. Thomas was 38, a successful lawyer, charismatic, respected, but inside, desperately lonely, haunted by a deep hunger for love, for connection, for meaning. And then he met her. Elena, brilliant, mysterious, enchanting. She saw through him, or so he thought. They talked for hours. She laughed at his jokes. She touched his arm, looked into his eyes, whispered that he was different. Thomas fell. Hard. Within weeks, he was skipping work to see her, writing poetry for the first time in years, buying gifts, planning trips, fantasizing about marriage. And at first, she played along, smiled, kissed, promised. Then it began. Cold silences, unexplained absences, busy weekends, forgotten birthdays, subtle mocking in front of friends. The more Thomas gave, the colder she became, until one day she disappeared. No message, no closure. Thomas was destroyed, not because of her, but because of what she had awakened and then withdrawn. He had given his power away, and she, whether knowingly or not, had devoured it. This is the brutal truth Jung saw, that within every man lies a feminine image, a yearning for completion. But unless a man makes this image conscious, unless he confronts his own anima, he will project it outward. And when he does, he becomes vulnerable to the devouring feminine. You may think, not all women are like this. Of course not. But the danger does not lie in the woman. It lies in you, in your blindness, in your hunger, in your unwillingness to face your own shadow. Jung wrote, when a man meets the woman who corresponds to his unconscious anima, the danger is always great. And so I ask you, how many times have you mistaken projection for love? How many times have you handed your power to an image, not a person? How many times have you played the fool in a story you didn't even know you were writing? It is time to wake up, the feminine as chaos. What men refuse to see. In Jung's private notes, there is a phrase that still sends chills down my spine. The feminine is not order. The feminine is chaos. Think about that. It goes against everything you've been taught. The modern world sells you a different story, that women are naturally nurturing, that they bring stability, that they calm the restless male spirit. But Jung, who spent his life studying not only minds but myths and the collective unconscious, saw a deeper truth, that the feminine, in its archetypal form, is not here to comfort you. It is here to test you, to shake you, to force you to grow, or to destroy you. Let me explain. In every culture, from ancient Greece to medieval Europe to Eastern philosophy, the feminine archetype appears again and again in one of two forms: the nurturing mother, life-giving, supportive; the dark feminine, chaotic, unpredictable, seductive, destructive. Both are real. Both exist in every woman and in every man's unconscious image of woman. But here is what Jung realized. When a man meets the dark feminine and is unprepared, it destroys him. Not because she is bad, but because she is stronger than he is. You've seen this. The man who falls under the spell of a woman he knows is wrong for him, but can't leave. The man who tolerates disrespect, cruelty, even abuse, because the pull is too strong. The man who loses everything, his friends, his purpose, his dignity, chasing the approval of a woman who will never truly respect him. And you wonder, how did this happen? Why can't he stop? Jung would answer, because he has been caught in the archetypal storm, the chaos of the feminine, without an anchor. There is an ancient story, one Jung often referenced, the tale of Circe. Circe, the enchantress of Greek myth, was known for her beauty, her allure, her power. Men would arrive on her island, proud, strong, confident, only to be seduced and turned into animals. Pigs, wolves, dogs. Why? Because they came unprepared. They followed instinct, not wisdom, and in doing so, they lost their humanity. Jung saw this myth not as fiction, but as a mirror, a reflection of what happens when a man meets the feminine without understanding his own anima, without facing his own shadow. In modern terms, you chase her beauty, you worship her charm, you ignore her darkness, and in doing so, you become the animal, not because of her, but because of your blindness. Let me tell you about Eric. Eric was 29, a personal trainer, good-looking, confident, or so it seemed. Then he met Lila, a woman unlike any he had known. She was wild, mysterious, playful, but with an edge. She teased him, challenged him. One moment affectionate, the next cold. One night in his arms, the next gone without explanation. Eric was hooked. He told himself, "She's just free-spirited. I can handle this. She'll settle down." But as the months passed, his obsession grew. He stopped seeing his friends, skipped workouts, neglected clients. His mood depended entirely on her attention, and when, inevitably, she left, he spiraled. Depression, rage, texting her in the middle of the night, stalking her social media, drinking alone. He had been, in Jung's terms, devoured. Jung would have said he mistook the goddess for the woman. He projected onto her not who she was, but what he longed for. And when the chaos of her nature clashed with his fantasy, he collapsed. Here is the brutal truth. The feminine is not obligated to give you peace. She is not obligated to heal your wounds. She is not obligated to conform to your ideal. And when you demand this of her, when you place your happiness in her hands, you invite chaos into your life. But there is a deeper level still. Jung believed that men seek chaos unconsciously, because through chaos the man is tested. Through the storm he discovers his strength or his weakness. This is why so many men chase unavailable women, why they stay in toxic relationships, why they are drawn to the very women who will hurt them. It is not stupidity. It is the unconscious seeking transformation. But transformation only comes if the man can face the chaos without losing himself. If he cannot, he is consumed. Jung warned, one must descend into the depths, but not become what dwells there. You may be thinking, but not all women are chaos. Of course, but the chaos is within the archetype. It is within you. It is the test of your own maturity. The man who cannot face this truth will either become bitter, blaming all women, become addicted, forever chasing the next goddess, become weak, surrendering his power in hope of approval. But there is another path, to awaken, to see the feminine clearly, not as savior, not as enemy, but as force, a force to respect, to admire, but never to submit to. Jung wrote, to love a woman truly, one must first love her shadow. And so I ask you, how many times have you confused chaos for love? How many times have you sought salvation and found suffering? How many times have you entered the storm without knowing why? The feminine shadow, when woman becomes the mirror of your wounds. There is a side of the feminine Jung rarely spoke of in public, not because he feared women, but because he feared for the men who were not ready to hear it. It is this: woman is the mirror of man's unconscious, not the sweet mirror of his fantasies, not the gentle echo of his desires, but a dark, merciless mirror reflecting not who he wants to be, but who he truly is. And most men cannot bear to look. Jung wrote in his private journals, "The anima calls forth what is unintegrated in the man. What he represses, she brings to life." What does this mean? It means that when you meet a woman, especially one who triggers deep attraction, you are not just meeting her. You are meeting yourself, your wounds, your shame, your unmet needs, your unresolved fears. And if you are unconscious of these things, she will awaken them, not through malice, not through intention, but through the archetypal power of the feminine. Have you ever noticed the woman you can't stop thinking about is often the one who makes you feel your deepest pain? That the more you crave her approval, the more unstable you become. That the more she withdraws, the more desperate you feel. Why? Because she is not rejecting you. She is triggering your oldest wound, the wound of the boy who felt unloved, the boy who felt unseen, the boy who believed that if he just tried harder, he would be enough. And so you try, and try, and try, until you collapse. Jung called this dynamic the negative anima possession. When a man becomes possessed by his own wounded projection of the feminine, when he mistakes his hunger for love itself. Let me tell you about Daniel. Daniel was 42, a successful entrepreneur, wealthy, respected, but inside, still the boy whose mother abandoned him at 5 years old. He never spoke of it. He told himself he was over it. But then he met Marissa, young, beautiful, playful, but distant. She reminded him of something he couldn't name. From the first night, he was hooked, not by her mind, not by her words, but by the feeling she gave him that maybe, finally, he could be enough. He showered her with gifts, took her on expensive trips, changed his entire life to fit hers, and at first she responded, smiled, laughed, let him in. But then, as always, the shift came. Less time, fewer replies, emotional coldness. Daniel didn't understand. He begged, pleaded, offered more, until one day she said, "You're smothering me." And she was gone. Daniel was devastated, not because he had lost her, but because he had lost hope. Hope that this wound inside him could finally be healed. Jung would say, he sought the mother in the lover and became her child. This is the danger when you meet the feminine, especially in its dark, archetypal form. It will awaken your deepest wounds, and if you do not face them, they will consume you. Most men live in this state, unaware, unintegrated. They move from woman to woman, hoping the next one will finally make them whole, that the next one will be different. But the problem is not her, it is the wound. And until the man faces his own shadow, no woman can save him. Jung wrote, "No external relationship can substitute for the relationship to the self." Here is the brutal truth. The woman you desire most is the one who triggers your wounds the deepest. Because the psyche seeks wholeness. It draws you toward what will force you to grow or break. But most men do not grow, they collapse. Because it is easier to chase her than to face yourself. The man who awakens begins to see, when she ignores me, what am I really feeling? When she pulls away, what is being triggered in me? When I crave her love, what emptiness am I trying to fill? And slowly, he stops blaming her. He stops chasing. He turns inward. He begins the real work. The work of healing the boy inside, of integrating the shadow, of reclaiming his power. Jung believed, until a man does this, he will forever be a slave to the feminine shadow, not because women are evil, but because his own unconscious will make them appear so. Have you ever noticed, the more unhealed the man, the more destructive the women he attracts? It is not coincidence. It is the psyche seeking what it needs, not what it wants. But when the man heals, truly heals, the chaos loses its power. The projection fades, and for the first time, he sees the woman clearly, not as savior, not as destroyer, but as human. And in that seeing, he is free. The feminine as initiation, the test of the mature man. There is a hidden purpose behind the chaos of the feminine, one that most men will never see, because they are too wounded or too asleep. But Jung saw it. In his letters and private writings, he hinted at something profound, that the feminine, in her darkest forms, is not your enemy. She is your test. She is your initiation. You were never meant to remain a boy. You were meant to become a man, a sovereign being, a grounded force in this chaotic world. But you cannot reach that level of being by comfort alone. not by ease, not by sweet love. You reach it by facing the dragon, by entering the storm, by confronting what terrifies you most. And in this mythic journey, the feminine is the storm. Jung wrote, "The anima tests the man not to destroy him, but to force him toward wholeness." Let me put it simply. When you are drawn to that chaotic woman, that wild, seductive, unpredictable feminine force, it is because some part of you knows, if I can face this, I will grow. But the test is dangerous, because if you are unready, you will not grow. You will fall. Consider the ancient myth of Inanna, the Sumerian goddess of love, war, and destruction. Inanna would lure kings and heroes into her temple. She would strip them of their power, their pride, their illusions. Some perished. Some went mad. But those few who faced her with courage and did not break emerged transformed, stronger, wiser, whole. Jung believed this myth lives on in modern men, in the encounters that break you or awaken you. That first heartbreak, that first betrayal, that first confrontation with the shadow feminine. It is not random. It is the archetype calling you to initiation. Let me tell you about Marco. Marco was 35, a stoic man, self-controlled, prideful in his independence. And then he met Sophia, beautiful, intense, enigmatic. She shattered his defenses, drew out emotions he thought long dead, made him feel alive and terrified. The relationship was fire and ice, passion, conflict, euphoria, despair. She pushed every button, exposed every weakness, mocked his pride, ignored his boundaries, and when she left, he was wrecked. But something strange happened. Instead of running to distractions, he sat with the pain. Instead of blaming her, he asked why he was drawn to her. Instead of seeking another woman, he sought himself. And through that darkness, he changed. Not bitter, not closed, but awake. For the first time, he saw women clearly, saw himself clearly. He was no longer ruled by the anima, no longer possessed by the need for love. He had passed the test. Jung believed this is the true purpose of the anima, not to give you comfort, but to force you to confront your inner chaos, to burn away the false self, to initiate you into mature masculinity. And here's what most men do not understand. The pain you feel after heartbreak is not punishment. It is initiation, the collapse of the boy, so that the man may rise. But if you run from it, if you numb it, if you chase the next illusion, you fail the test, and the cycle repeats. That is why you see so many broken men in their 30s, 40s, 50s, still chasing the anima, still hoping the next woman will save them. Because they refused initiation. They stayed boys. They stayed asleep. But for the few who dare to face it, to enter the fire, to endure the chaos without losing their center, they emerge sovereign, grounded, unafraid, no longer seeking salvation in the feminine, no longer addicted to illusion. Finally, whole. Jung wrote, "A man must marry his own soul before he can truly love a woman, and that is the path. Not away from women, not into hatred, but into clarity, so that when you do love, it is from strength, not hunger, from freedom, not slavery, from illusion to sovereignty." The final awakening. Before we begin this final section, if what you've heard so far resonates with something deep inside you, if it is put into words things you've long suspected but never dared to say out loud, subscribe to this channel. Leave a comment below, not for the algorithm, but for yourself and for other men reading. Because sometimes the words of a stranger are the first sign that you are not alone. Now, let us finish. Carl Jung once wrote, "The man who integrates his anima becomes sovereign." But what does this mean? It means there comes a moment in a man's life when he stops seeking salvation in the feminine, when he no longer looks for the one to complete him, when he no longer chases the dream of perfect love. Because he has faced himself, he has faced his wounds, he has faced his shadow, and in doing so, he reclaims his power. Most men never reach this point. Most stay trapped in the cycle, projection, obsession, collapse, repeat. They move from woman to woman, from illusion to illusion, forever hoping, forever falling. Because it is easier to chase her than to confront yourself. It is easier to blame women than to take full responsibility for your life. But the man who awakens changes everything. He sees the feminine is not salvation. She is not enemy. She is force. And I am sovereign. Let me tell you about Victor. Victor was 47, 2 divorces, 3 major heartbreaks, years wasted in obsession, in bitterness, in self-pity, until one night, alone in a cabin in the mountains, something broke. Not in anger, not in despair, but in clarity. He wrote in his journal, "I have been chasing a ghost, not a woman, not love, but the missing part of myself." That night, something shifted. He stopped chasing, stopped blaming. He turned inward, faced the wounds he had run from for decades. It was not easy. It took months, years. But slowly he changed. The hunger faded, the illusions dissolved, and for the first time, he stood alone, whole, free. Jung called this the marriage of the self. Only when a man unites with his own soul can he meet the woman as she is, not as he wishes her to be. This is the final awakening. When you no longer seek completion in her, when you no longer give your power away, when you no longer fall for the seduction of the anima, you stand, and in standing, you become untouchable. Women will still test you. The chaos will still swirl. The archetypes will still pull. But you will not lose yourself, because you are no longer ruled by hunger, no longer ruled by projection, no longer ruled by fear. You have become sovereign. And here is the secret most men will never hear. When you stop seeking women to complete you, the right women are drawn to you. Not because you need them, not because you worship them, but because you are whole, and wholeness is magnetic. Sovereignty is irresistible, because deep down the feminine seeks not a boy to save, but a man who needs no saving. Jung believed this was the final gift of the anima, not to enslave you, but to awaken you, to drive you to face yourself, to burn away the illusion, to forge you into something greater than you were. And so I ask you, are you ready? To stop chasing, to stop blaming, to stop projecting, to do the one thing the anima demands of you, to grow. Because in the end, you do not need her love. You do not need her approval. You do not need her validation. You need your power, your center, your truth. And when you have that, no woman, no illusion, no chaos can ever enslave you again.